Good morning, everyone. Uh,
Good morning.
Thank you for your presence. And as always, I would like to know if there are any questions about what we talked about yesterday or anything else for that matter.
I have a question.
Okay.
Moses mean to draw out, and is it something that we are to draw out within ourselves? And how does that relate to what we're dealing with today, in today's society?
Okay. That's about 3 questions, but okay. When we look at the meaning of the name of Moses, it does indeed speak to drawing out, or more specifically, it speaks to pulling out. And the reason I believe that it speaks to pulling something out is because of the difficulty that one has with transforming people from religion to spirituality. That transformation is difficult, to say the least. As to how it speaks to us today, it is really a mirror to what we are currently doing, and that is seeking the truth of the scriptures, understanding that the content is an allegory filled with metaphors. When we understand that, we're able to get to what is really being said. And as a result of that, we put it in the macro, and as we do that, we are drawing, pulling out of each other the religious things that we have been taught, as well as giving opportunity to others to do the same by virtue of putting it in the macro. Does that help you? Is there anyone else who wants to speak to that?
This is Barbara. Additionally, there's that constant drawing out of ourselves, the uncertainty about stuff, drawing out of doubt about who we are and what we believe, and the putting aside what we see with the eyes and drawing upon what the eye sees.
Thank you. I agree with that. Actually, if we look at if we delve deeper into the meaning of the wife of Moses, Zipporah, what we see is that her name speaks to doubt, or it says that it's a bird or dubious or hopping around like a bird. It speaks to be wavering or hesitating in your opinions. It speaks of doubt. And that tells me that this is a precursor to what Moses was to deal with in the wilderness, which means, again, that we are talking about Zipporah, the wife of Moses, and at the same time, we are truly speaking about the doubt that occurs when the attempt to pull out the religious things or the incorrect things is being done. So her name is actually a metaphor for the a representation of those who are in the wilderness who doubt whether it's true or not and who are struggling to believe it. And as I say that, I would like to see if there are questions or comments or any additions to that before I look at something else. Okay.
Pastor, the bird, Zipporah's name, you said bird doing what again?
It means bird, and when you deal with the roots of it, it means to hop around like a bird. And it also says that it means doubt and wavering. And that's tantamount to a bird. It's like a bird hopping around, don't know where it wants to go. I'm not sure where it is. That's an old, observation that's made, that's applied to people with doubt. That's an Eastern observation.
Don't birds represent thoughts?
Well, it depends on whether they're flying or not, too.
Okay.
Haven't you heard someone say that you're fluttering like a bird, you don't know which way to go?
Yes. You're fluttering around like a bird, yeah.
Yeah. So it's in sense. Keep in mind that different animals does indeed speak to us about different aspects of our lives, but there are some that speak to us about multiple aspects of our lives. The sheep being docile, the sheep being sheared, the sheep being slaughtered. The question is, for what purpose? Those kinds of things are apply to animals, or also apply to personality traits of humans.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else? Yesterday, as we looked
Pastor.
at Moses, yes, go ahead.
It also means goat and crown as well, and it's a reminder of what Zipporah did in Exodus when her father-in-law, the Midian priest Jethro, brought her to them. When Moses went back to his father-in-law Jethro, and asked if he could go back to his relatives in Egypt if they're still there. That's when the Lord first called Moses. And I believe it was Zipporah who circumcised. Oh, yeah. Okay. And then she said, let my son, you must say to Pharaoh, thus say the Lord, that's blah, 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 my first one. I said, let my son go that he may serve me, but since you have refused to let him go, I will surely kill him, your son, your firstborn. So on the way, they stopped, and the Lord met Moses and sought to kill him. And that's the first time I remember seeing the Lord on the way at a place where they stopped. I wonder if this is the right interpretation. But anyway, it says now on the way at a place. This is in Exodus 4:24. On the way at a place where they stopped for the night, the Lord met Moses and sought to kill him. But Zipporah took a flint knife, cut off the foreskin of her son, and touched it to Moses' feet and said, surely you are a bridegroom of blood to me. And so the Lord let him alone. At that time, she said a bridegroom of blood, referring to the circumcision. So she reminded Zipporah, if this is the correct interpretation, she reminded the Lord of the promise of the circumcision, in a sense. Do you follow what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, she reminded Moses that he had not followed through with the circumcision, and as a result of that, the Lord had set out to kill him because every male in his household was supposed to be circumcised on the 8th day.
And his son. Okay, gotcha. So it sounds like Zipporah. You know, there are different meanings to her name, and it's like us. There are different differences in the attributes that come forward in us that are drawn from us, and we can see the different ones being drawn from Zipporah, meaning the bird with, flitting around at one point in time, to this staunch supporter of her husband, trying to prevent his death by reminding him of his responsibility under the promise to God.
Absolutely. That's exactly what it was about. Moses had not followed through with the covenant that had been made with Abraham. And if the son had not been circumcised, then it says that Moses would have been put to death. Also, that would have ended the covenant as well.
And all of this related to Moses having grown up, if you will, in Egypt, where those edicts weren't being followed because of the Egyptian culture. So this sort of pulled him back on track in a sense to his
Absolutely.
purpose.
And I think I see the reason for that too. And I'm going to talk about that in a few moments when we began looking at Moses leaving on his way back to Egypt, the same section, I believe, Barbara, that you are making reference to. What happened is, and if we look at the beginning of the issues with
Sorry,
Moses.
Pastor, can you get a little closer to your mic? Thank
Yes,
you.
ma'am. You're quite welcome. It asked me that because there are times that I'd be thinking and talking at the same time, trying to filter through stuff in my head. I appreciate that. Yesterday when we talked about when we talked about the daughters of Ruel, of Jethro, being at that well, watering the sheep, what we saw is that when the daughters came back to tell him what happened, and when it says that Ruel, their father, said, "Why have you come back so soon today?" Well, first of all, when it says Ruel, their father, if you look at that, it's Abun. So it is into the spiritual aspects of a father. And in the case of Ruel, when it says Ruel, it says that means a friend of God. So that when they came back to him, it is speaking to the Shekinah, and that Shekinah speaking to God or their father about what it saw. What experience did it have? The experience that it had is there was a man, well, who drew out water. So the drawing out with Moses' name in relationship to the drawing out of misinterpretation interpretations out of people begins with the Shekinah. It starts with the Shekinah, which is feminine aspects of the Creator. The drawing out starts there, and it speaks to God saying to us, or to the feminine aspects of our being, that you must feed him, or bring him that I may feed him. And the feeding of Moses is not sitting at a table as much as it is feeding him in a spiritual sense. The complications in trying to explain this comes because when the stories were told and when they were written down, there were messages embedded in them, and the messages were covered with the names of people and places. And the reason it was done that way is it was because it was easier to pass on to the next generation in story form. Also, it was difficult for anyone who did not have a genuine desire to understand. It was difficult for them, if not impossible, to pull from this the understanding of what the spirituality that's embedded in it. So bear with me as we talk this out. So I hope you understand what I'm saying. So when the story is told, it says that an Egyptian delivered them from the hands of the shepherd. First of all, yesterday when we talked about the Egyptian, I raised the question about how did they know there was an Egyptian, and when we talked it out, we concluded that it was because of the way he was dressed. However, if you look at Egyptian, it is not even there in the scriptures in that spot. What there is Ish, a man. Speaking, it says Ish delivered us from the hands of the shepherd. So it's speaking to spiritual masculinity. It is not talking about the mortal man who's in the flesh. When it talks about the mortal man who's in the flesh, is Enosh. So what we are seeing here is the development of a spiritual story that is told in physical terms. And I pray that you would bear with me. I'm looking at, this is in the second chapter of Genesis and the 19th verse, or the 18th verse as well.
Exodus.
I'm sorry, Exodus. Well, I guess I got Genesis on my brain. But it's in the second chapter of Exodus, beginning with the 18th verse. And when we look at that about the Egyptian, what we are seeing is that Moses decides to stay there, and they did not as a Egyptian based on what his clothes. It should have been Ish, and that is one of the reasons we have to make sure that when we're dealing with the names, we look them up and get the real meaning, because in different places, under different circumstances, they are speaking to, they mean different things. So after this happened, Moses stayed there and became a shepherd to the sheep of Reuel. Now, when we look at the third chapter, that first verse, it begins with, now Moses was pasturing the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law. And Jethro means abundance. And speaking of it spiritually, knowing that he was a priest, it is speaking to the abundance of wisdom as well as an abundance that he had in terms of material possessions. In other words, he was well off. And this speaks to the idea of seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all other things will be added. So when we look at Jethro, when it references Jethro, it's speaking about him having abundance, and it also speaks to where Moses was in Midian. It speaks to Moses being in the wilderness, and he came to Horeb, which is the mountain of God. Now, Horeb speaks to a desolate place or a desert. So why is it that the mountain of God would be a desolate place? Why is it that it would be a desert? When it speaks of this, Moses being in a desert place, it is referencing Moses being in a place of what the mountain represents, elevation of thought. Moses being there, but he had none. He was in a desert place. He was in a wilderness. He was at a desert place, and he had no understanding of who he was and what he was supposed to do. So even though we are supposed to draw out of humanity the things that causes them to have an animalistic thought, we first must deal with who we are. We first must draw out of us. And what we see in this is that Moses saw a bush that was burning, and the bush was not consumed, meaning that Moses, we are experiencing a period when the dross is being burned off of us, or when the things that prick us, such as the misinterpretations that we've been taught, the things that injure us, when we seek our Creator based upon the erroneous things that we've been taught. What we are shown is that those things are burned away, but the fire does not consume the bush. In other words, it does not consume what it is burning. It gets our attention. And that speaks to our struggling with believing something that we have been shown, struggling with something that is totally different than what we have been taught. And when we look at it from that perspective, then we get a better understanding of what's taking place at this time. And this goes on to show us something. When Elohim introduces himself to Moses, the introduction comes with this: take off your sandals, because the ground that you stand on is holy ground. What it's saying is, stop your travels. Be still. Be still for what purpose? Ground speaks to your consciousness, your awareness. Be still because what you are observing is speaking to your awareness. It's been your awareness, your consciousness has been set aside for you to hear me. And I'll show you what I'm talking about in a moment about being set aside for you to hear me. get away from the TV, turn the radio off, seclude yourself, because I'm speaking to you. I'm speaking to the consciousness that should not be, I don't want you to interrupt, brother, the consciousness, the awareness that I'm about to give you. I don't want you to miss it. So what we see from that point is not only was Moses afraid, but Moses was attentive to what was being said. So when we hear the voice and we are hearing things that is not in keeping with what we have been taught and what we have taught ourselves, then there is a sense, not of fear in terms of shudder of fear, but in the sense of making sure that what we are about to, what we are reverencing is something that comes from our Creator. And when I say this part, I want to ask if there are any questions. So when this happens, that's when the introduction comes. And then it speaks to it says that I have heard the cries of and the afflictions of my people who are in Egypt, and have given heed to their cry. Verse 7, that is, because of their taskmasters, I'm aware of their suffering. That is no different than us coming to an understanding in this place, in this wilderness, that the Creator has heard our cries. The Creator is saying to us, I've heard the cries. I've seen the afflictions. I know about the racism. I know about the misogyny. I know about the difference in how you are treated. I know about the slums that you are forced to live in. I know how you are considered a non-citizen, not even a second-class citizen, but a non-citizen. I've heard that, and this is what he's saying to Moses. So he's saying, I have come down. I have come to deliver them from the power of Egypt. What he's saying is, I have come to deliver them from the governmental powers, from the religious powers. I have come to deliver them from that enclosure that they have been trapped in. And the enclosure that they have been trapped in is an enclosure that has as its foundation religion, and it feeds into the government. I've come to deliver them from that. And here we are at this moment seeking to do the same thing. Draw out of humanity all of those things that has caused it to cease to be human and become animalistic in nature and in thought. Are there any questions or comments? Am I?
I get. Oh,
go ahead.
Yes, sir. You're clear. I'm just looking at something and back up a little bit here. It looks like, if you're not careful, a lot of this kind of coincidental, and we know that it is not. One of the keys here is Moses making a stand. When he saw the two men fighting, he made a stand. He made a choice. He made a decision. So it is him killing that side of himself. I've made a decision of who I am, and although he had no idea at all from a spiritual perspective. That decision drives everything else as to what he encounters from that point. So it looks like it says, and he stopped and he settles here in Midian, and you know that's no coincidence. You know, he it's not that the land called him. There was something in the land. You mentioned the ground talks about consciousness. He had to stop there because of the decision he made. He had to stop there. The other thing that kind of stands out to me is Jethro or Ruel's response. Why did you come back so quickly? Which says to me that he was aware of the, I want to use the word conflict, but that may not be the right word, because he knew that they were not in danger, but he knew that the shepherds did not harm his daughters, but there was a conflict there, and that's another whole matter. I don't know if you can look at it as a disrespect to femininity. I don't know if it was, them bullying them or whatever the case it was. Jethro was aware of it, but it did not seem to alarm him. He says, "Why are you here so early today?" And which tells me that he knew that what the case was. So I guess what I'm getting at is we look at our lives sometimes and things seem to happen haphazardly, and we seem to wonder why this and why that, things that seem to be conflicting with us. But this all happens based on him making a decision on who he wants to be and what he wants to pursue. And I just thought that was not to be overlooked.
Thank you. In addition to that, Ron, when he said, when Moses did what he did at the well, that was no different than Jesus saying to those men who if you are without sin, cast the first stone. The same type of protection, the same type of intervention.
Yeah.
And the intervention is because there is a disrespect for the Shekinah, for feminine energy, for the female that represents this. And this is what Moses is talking about, are intervening about, as Jesus did. And what both of them are doing in that regard is saying a disrespect for the physical female is no different than disrespect for the Shekinah, disrespect for the spirit. And I'm going to show you why I arrived at that. The reason is because the overwhelming majority, and in some places all of them are male, the pastors, the preachers are male. I remember very clearly when the first male was ordained as a preacher in the association, Second Mountain Baptist Association. I remember that. So it hasn't been that long ago. And what I'm getting at is this. The representation of what those shepherds did and what those men were doing is indicative of what happened in regards to pastors and preachers and male leadership who debase females and use females for the purposes of raising money and uses females to stay in power. Do you see what I'm getting at?
Yes.
So I don't see a difference in those at all.
Something else I forgot to say, and you just reminded me of it. We do know the 7 daughters we do know 7 talks about completeness. 7 talks about being fat, being full. So what this is saying is he had reached a point that the Shekinah, his decision, the place that he settled in, again, is not a coincidence. This is a spiritual thing now. So there is nothing that he can be lacking because of this state that he's in. We're talking about a state of mind. He's open to be filled. He's open to whatever. He's made a decision, and if you want to look at it in a human way right now, he if you want to look at it and say, okay, he just killed somebody and he left the home that he knows. So he's open. He's made a decision that this is not the life I want. Although I had riches, I had everything, the other part of me was being enslaved. The other part of me was being, not being, being made submissive, for lack of a better way of putting it. So he makes that decision, but he doesn't know what's next. So he's open. He is open to what happens, what the Creator wants to do with him. So this 7 talks about the fullness of the Shekinah, and that is what was open to him, and that is what he needs to be coupled with, and he sees that and readily becomes a part of it. So his being submissive to Jethro is all a part of that, and that is again part of the process that we go through. I think we talked about it a couple of weeks ago. We have all kind of set our intent and moving in a direction. So the things that happen to us are not a coincidence. It's one of those things that we are to grow by, and we are to see and observe and become closer to our Creator because of it, or become our Creator because of it. But that's all. Thank you.
Any questions or comments about that?
Well, one thing it also makes me think about, Pastor, is when you were talking about consciousness, giving up consciousness, and being open to, and Ron was talking about being open to the Creator. And then you were also talking about being sort of submissive, but it makes me think about the real need for us to be in meditation, because that in a sense allows us to sort of give up our own consciousness and be open and submissive to what the Creator has to tell us. And in that way, we are sort of being in the same position as Moses was.
Thank you.
That's it.
Anyone else?
Pastor, the Egyptian that Moses killed, was it a part of him that he killed, so to speak, or? Yeah.
He is no different than you knew that there was more to be had. And what you did, you began to search for more. And you hid it from the people who were in that congregation because you knew that they would castigate you if they knew what you were doing. And then you were guided to a priest who totally embraced the reality of the Shekinah and the presence of the Creator. And while you were with that priest, you began to see more of what you were searching for. And what that priest did was challenge the doubt that you were having, Zipporah. And what that priest did in challenging that was to bring you to a place of contemplation. And that place of contemplation is that wilderness. And while you are in that wilderness, you begin to experience things that you've never experienced before. You may have visions about things that you've never ever thought about. You may see more in the scriptures than what you have been taught. And now that that has taken place, or prior to that taking place, rather, let me say this, put a pin in there, let me say this. The reason I know this is spiritual also is because it said holy ground. It did not say holy ground in that would be holy ground physically. But when it says holy ground, it is the same word that's used for Adam. So it's talking about the spiritual essence that we were created with. Now, as we look at that, we see that we hear that you are not here for yourself. You are here for the purpose of going back to that cramped space and delivering my people. And what happens with that is you are told what you need to do in order to accomplish that deliverance. And in the beginning, what happened? We began to do it just as Moses did, make excuses. Moses made excuse after excuse. When he was told about deliverance, what was his excuse? His first excuse was, who am I? Verse 11, chapter 3, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh, that I should bring the sons of Israel out of Egypt? An excuse. Who am I? What? Who am I to go to the big house? Pharaoh speaks to big house. Pharaoh also speaks to the house of Ptah, which is spiritual. Who am I to go to the Pharaoh and tell him to let the sons of Israel go? What is he saying? Son means to build up. Who am I to tell the religious pastors or tell the religious leadership, the ecclesiastical clan, who am I to tell them that they are wrong? Who am I to tell them that those who are builders, building up to become those who will rule as God? Who am I to tell Pharaoh that that's who these people are, and I have come to deliver them so they can become who they were created to be? Can you see that?
Yes, because you're talking about what the majority of us, when you first started that journey with all of us, we left that cramped space physically, and now that we've been, we've been shown the truth. I mean, it's just the same journey. It seems like the same journey that Moses had, we're having.
It is. And the cramped space was not so much physically, it was spiritually. We were not allowed to explore who we are spiritually. We were kept in a space of spirituality that did not exist. And when we were given the opportunity to leave it or to free those from it, all excuses were made, all kinds. Who am I? Then the Creator says what? I will be with you, and this will be a sign to you that is I who have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you shall worship God at this place. I'm going to be with you no matter what. We have gone through that. I'm going to be with you. I know you're struggling with this, but I want you to know that once you have freed them from that cramped space, I'm going to guide you to a place where you can be submissive to Elohim. I'm going to guide you to a place where you can be submissive. What is he talking about? If we jump forward, what he's talking about is the wilderness. Then Moses says, behold, I am going to the sons of Israel and shall say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you. Now they may say to me, listen to this, they might say to me, what is his name? What shall I say to them? All kinds of excuses. The reasons why we won't walk away. I can't walk away because this is where my funeral is going to be. This is my family church. I can't walk away because what I have learned about God is that one day when I die, I'm going to be in heaven. I can't walk away from that. So when they tell me this, what am I to say to them? I don't know what to say. Who sent you? Who told you this stuff? Then the response is, I am who I am. Thus you shall say to the sons of Israel, I am has sent me to you. What is he saying? What he's saying is, when we speak to am, talk about I am or am, it's speaking to existence. You tell them that everything that is sent you. The self-existent one sent you. The one who brought existence into being sent you. You tell them that. And then he says to Moses, you shall say to the sons of Israel, the Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and the God of Jacob has sent you. And then he goes on to say, this is my name forever. He's talking about I am. He's talking about self-existence. That word comes from, has a root, the same root as Yahweh has. It has the same root as Jehovah has. So he's saying, this name is my memorial name to all generations. In other words, this is what you would tell every generation. Regardless of what you go through, I am going to be the same. That's what our responsibility is. Tell them who sent me. The one who sent me is the one who taught me. The one who sent me is the one who told Abraham he would be the father of many nations. The one who sent me is the same one who told Jacob, who changed Jacob's name to Israel. So when Abraham's name was changed, if you look at when he speaks about him being the father of nations, he is talking about Avram being the father of nations. Avram changing you from the going to church to have a good time to Israel, to those who are willing to rule as God. What happened in church today? We had a ball. It was on today. As opposed to being taught how to embrace the reality of your existence. You were brought into existence to be Elohim in this body. And when you are Elohim in this body, you are human. And that is Elohim having a physical experience. Is this clear?
Crystal clear, Pastor.
Thank you. So, are there any comments about this or questions? And I'm not going through this verse by verse. And the reason I'm not is because I have to talk about what I see, what I'm being shown. And in doing that, let me ask, are there questions or comments once more before I move on? So So what happens is, if you continue, what you're going to hear is our conversation about between Moses and God continuing. However, if we go to the next excuse is the first verse in the 4th chapter. Then Moses answered and said, "What if they will not believe me? What if they will not listen to me? What if they will not listen to what I say? For they might say, the Lord has not appeared to you." Excuse. They might not believe me. And let me tell you up front that I have been there. The reason I kept so long that Jesus and Mary of Magdala were married is because I was afraid you guys wouldn't believe me. The reason I held on to an understanding that we are Elohim is the same thing. They may not believe me. He asked Moses, "What do you have in your hand?" He says, "A staff." He says, "Lay it on the ground." He lays it down. It becomes a serpent. He says, "Now pick it up." He grabs it by the tail. It becomes a staff again. What is he saying? He's saying, work with what you have in your hand. He's saying, you deal with what you know. You know that you have a staff, but I will show you the miracle that you can do with that staff. Then he says to Moses, "Put your hand in your bosom." And he does it, and it comes out leprous. What is he saying? The authority that you have is equal to what a sickness of leprosy is, which means that the only authority that you have is that what you have been given by religion, and it kills people. It separates people because leprous people were sent out to die. They were separated from the rest of the people. And he's saying this is separation that you have been taught. When he takes his hand out, it is healed again. It is like his flesh again. And he says, these are the signs that I want you to show. Deal with what you have. And when you deal with what you have, you will see that you will no longer be separating people. You will be bringing them together. And he says, what I want you to do when you get to Egypt, if they don't believe you, take some water out of the Nile and pour it in a dry place, and it shall turn to blood. What is he saying? He's saying when you use what you have in terms of the staff, when you understand that what you have been taught is separating people, but you are there to bring them together, he says, then what you will see is that life will come to dry places. Where there are dry places, life will spring up. Why do I say that? Because the scripture clearly says, for the life of Adam is in the blood. So he's telling him, as we are telling us rather, that we have to use what we have. What did I have? Strong's Concordance sitting on the floor, trying to understand. What did I come to realization of? The things that I had been taught in the scriptures were separating us. There were big wheel churches. There were big shot preachers. There were churches that were not even recognized because the pastor there could barely read, or the chief pastor didn't like them. That's where the differentiations came. Or the people there were country folk. Everything that could separate. That's what I saw. And when I began to see that, I understood that that's not who I am. And I began to pour out of what I was being shown into dry places. Dry places meaning that there's no life there because the truth is not there. And when the truth, when that journey started, it was with follow me as I follow God. What I have been teaching you has not been right. And I promise you, from this day forward, what I teach you will definitely be in the Scriptures. Challenge me, ask me questions. And that is when the blood was poured out in dry places, meaning that life was beginning to spring up because the truth was being told, the truth was being understood, the truth was being researched, and it was not just the masculine, the man who was searching for this truth or who felt like he knew everything. No, it was an embracing of the Shekinah in order to be able to see what the Creator was doing in terms of bringing us to a place of the realization that we are Elohim. Any questions about that?
Pastor, what you're talking about is not it's not just religion as far as using what you have, because if you don't mind, at work, I went in to my administrator and I told him I wanted a raise. And then it hit me. No, everybody on this board deserves a raise. And I went in there with what I knew, I had no fear or anything. And it didn't hit me till after I left his office. Girl, you could have lost your job, but it didn't matter at that time. And then even after that, I thought about it. I said, I don't care. At least I'm standing for something. And it wasn't just for me. It was for everybody. So is that the same scenario? What you're saying?
But see, the other thing is this. Is spirituality. It was your spiritual belief that gave you the strength to do that. And the foundation of government is church, is religion. So it's the same thing.
Yeah, because there's politics at work as well. It's heavy, and it's the same thing.
No, baby, your job is political. There is nothing in government that's not political. And it gets its strength from the politics of the church.
I see that.
Okay. Anyone else? So, here comes the next excuse in verse 10 of that 4th chapter. Then Moses says to the Lord, please, Lord, I have never been eloquent, neither recently nor in time past, nor since thou hast spoken to thy servant, for I am slow of speech and slow of tongue. I know I have. I was told that Moses was talking about he stuttered when he speaks. That's not what he was saying. That is not what he was saying. Moses was making an excuse. He says that I cannot speak eloquently enough for them to believe me. That's another excuse. I have had pastors, and I use me because I know me. I've had pastors to tell me the reason that I don't understand as you do is because you are smarter. If I were smart as you, I would know this. I would understand this. And my response was, if you want to know it, I will teach you in secret if necessary. And the response to that was, okay, but it never came. The excuse was, I can't speak eloquently. In other words, I don't know enough to speak to Pharaoh. And this triggered anger. The Lord says to him, who made your mouth? Who makes man dumb or deaf or blind? Is it not the Lord? Then he says, now then go, and even I will be with your mouth and teach you what to say. In other words, I will teach you. Just open your mouth and I will speak for you. Why are you making all of these excuses? And there are people on this phone this day who have made the same excuses that Moses made, and I'm one of them. But in terms of the speaking, making an excuse about that, no, I didn't do that one. Then he says, please, Lord, send the message by whomever you will. In other words, send that message by somebody else. Don't bother me. Then the anger, 14, of the Lord burned against Moses. Is there not your brother Aaron, the Levite? I know that he speaks fluently. He speaks well. He is coming out to meet you. And when he sees you, he will be glad in his heart. All he's saying is that the day will come when you will see that you have the fluency to do what I am telling you to do. And in that next verse, what we see is, and the Lord saying, and you are to speak to him, to put the words in his mouth, and I will be with your mouth and his mouth, and I will teach you what you are to do. In other words, you are going to tell him what I am saying to you. In other words, you are going to speak what I am telling you to speak. Then listen at this. He shall speak for you to the people, and it shall come about that he shall be as your mouth, and you shall be as God, as Elohim to him. In other words, what he's saying is, if you are afraid to speak, I will put the words in you. And you say it to those who you're comfortable with. And the word, and those who you're comfortable with will become your mouthpiece. And you will be Elohim to them. You will be their God. And that is the reason when in the mountain in the wilderness, they were acting crazy and making God. And Elohim says to Moses, go down and see about your people. He did not say my people, because Moses was God to the people. You get that?
Yes.
So, in summary, we have been given a golden opportunity to be the deliverers for those who are in the bondage of religion, government, and all the other things. We have been given the golden opportunity to bring deliverance to them. And as we bring deliverance to them, we bring deliverance to ourselves. And that deliverance is predicated on us understanding what the scriptures are truly saying to us. When we talk about Zipporah or the 12 sons and one daughter of Ishmael and Jacob, when we talk about those things, what we are beginning to see is this: that nothing exists in this earth without the Shekinah. Meaning that we are incapable of understanding anything in the scriptures without us having an affection, an understanding, a unicity with Shekinah. The Shekinah is not the one who makes you shout. The music is. The Shekinah is not the one who causes you to amen and clap. It is the sound of what's being said. If it was the Shekinah doing that, then why is it that a week later you don't know what they said? Why is it the same message comes over and over and you respond the same way? There is no growth. So I am saying to you today, we have no excuses for discontinuing this journey. And even if you do it, there's nothing for you to go back to anyway. The only thing that the scriptures is telling us is that we have made excuse after excuse instead of listening to the direction of our Creator. At some point, I want to talk about the reason that there was one daughter and 12 sons. The reason Rebecca did what she did. The reason Hagar did what she did. The reason Sarah did what she did. I want to talk about that. Why did they do that? Yes.
Before you talk about that, when you were saying, when if you want to go back, you ain't it ain't gonna be the same anymore. Cause once you've been open to the truth, it's not gonna be the same. You ain't gonna be the same as you was before you got started, because it's gonna be a difference in you than it ever have been.
Yes, exactly. I remember clearly that I was going to this church and I was going to do this message on the pastor's anniversary. And I was determined that I was not going to deal with the stuff that I had seen. I stood up and when I opened my mouth, my papers went everywhere. And I started preaching from memory. And all of a sudden, it just flowed out of my mouth. It doesn't matter to me what you think about me. I have to say what I've been. And I began to bring things out at that point that made people very uncomfortable. I was trying to be something that I wasn't. You know what that is? I was trying to be the dog who returned to his vomit. Once you start this journey and you turn back, it's like a dog returning to his vomit, meaning that the very thing regurgitated, you are trying to ingest it all over again. That's not going to happen. Does that make sense to you guys? Or are there words about this? Comments?
It makes sense.
Say again?
I have a question.
Yes?
Okay, now what you just said, about a dog returning to his vomit, I know as far as what the Bible says. So is that the same as someone, coming to our church or coming to our class or whatever on a regular basis, and then going back to their church and they're hearing that same thing what you just talking about, returning to with that religion, that religious type message? Is that the same thing? Like they've been exposed to the truth.
It is and it isn't.
Okay.
It is if you travel the journey long enough to understand what truth is. That's when you have nothing to turn back to, as was with Peter speaking to Jesus. If you, for example, if you come to the class and the reason you're in there is because you want to understand the scripture that you got to speak about or preach about or teach in Sunday school.
Uh-huh.
then you have never left that pathway. You only came to get something for selfish reasons. So you're not returning to anything. You never left it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Any other questions or comments about that or anything else?
Pastor Ron, I have a comment. I wanted to back up a minute and look at the serpent, the staff and the serpent, because when Moses drew it, does shows this to Pharaoh. Pharaoh does something similar with his serpent, and what I'm looking at here, Moses' serpent. What this means is comes from the Hebrew word Nachash, Nachasha. It means to observe the signs or seeking knowledge of the future of something that is unknown by supernatural means. So, in other words, what this is saying to me is the fullness of the Shekinah that was before him. There was nothing that he was lacking in. So, opening his eye, the spiritual eye, he could see everything that needed to be done, all the wisdom, everything that he needed to make his presentation to Pharaoh is right there before him. So that I just want to point that out because I guess it's something that always kind of puzzles me as well.
Well, the other part of that is this. What about the Pharaoh? Magicians laying down their staff and it turned to a serpent.
Yeah, and that's what I meant. That there was a difference. Theirs was religious trickery. It wasn't in anything or them observing the signs. It wasn't them trying to see looking through their third eye and trying to see things supernatural. It was something different.
It was different, yes, because we are to be wise as a serpent, but harmless as a dove, right?
Correct.
So the wisdom that Moses represented was in that staff. And the staff of the Pharaoh were laid down, and they turned to two serpents. And Moses' serpent swallowed both of them, which means that regardless of how much wisdom they pretend to have, the wisdom that you have always overshadows it, because the wisdom that you have comes from the source of truth. And the wisdom that they have has been made up as they went along for the purpose of manipulation, and that is ingested, or that is overshadowed by the true wisdom. Does that make sense to you?
Yes.
The other thing that it represents is that God used Moses to go to the head of the matter, because in ancient Egypt, they were practicing magicians as well, and the rod was a symbol of sovereignty and royal authority and royal power in Egypt, and the snake represented the cobra goddess, and so all of the pharaohs would wear the snake on the forehead of their headdress, and the snake symbolized divine protection and sovereignty. So what the Lord did, what the Creator did was, as you said, He showed them that the wisdom of the Most High was much higher than what the Egyptians thought as sovereignty. That this was a much higher sovereignty than they could ever even think. So what the Creator was doing was allowing Moses to use symbols that the Egyptians used, basically, but to also, in addition to that, show that God's symbols were much more powerful.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Is there anyone else? Okay.
I think that points to something else too, Barbara. I think what it looks at, it shows that how religion takes truth and gets to a point where it can be manipulated and stops without seeing the true power of it. So these were things that they had to get those things from somewhere. Sometimes the idea had to come from something that was practiced, some kind of magic. So it very well could have been used to pursue truth, but it was used to manipulate people and bring about fear, I suppose, as opposed to using it for divine purposes. So it just shows, I guess, the difference in saying you can look at something that looks real, like I can use the Bible to either bring about truth or bring about manipulation.
Charismatic minister.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Okay. I want to stop here about, I know we said a lot today. And at some point, maybe tomorrow, I'm not sure, I want to talk about, as I said earlier, the reason that the females who are mentioned by name were able to accomplish what they accomplished. And I want us to be able to see that with the clarity, and that will give us a sense of where we are in terms of this journey right now. So, if there aren't any other questions, Did someone say something? Okay. I want to bring us to a stopping place here, and the recording can be stopped so I can say some other things.